Hi, my name is James Whistler, and I'm going to show you how to use the Code tabs within IronSpeed Designer to customize code in your applications. Here we have a typical IronSpeed application. In this case, we're looking at the Southwind example that ships with the product and the Show Categories table page. As you can see at the top here, we're looking at the page through live preview, so effectively we're looking at a browser view of the page within the IronSpeed Designer product. On the left hand side here, within our Application Explorer, we have the different pages which are visible within the presentation layer, and at the moment of course we've selected the Show Categories table page, which is the reason we're looking at it in the live preview on the right hand side. So let's move over to Design mode and have a look at the structure of this and understand the nature of the layout of the sections of the page, the hierarchy of that page content. So now that we're in design mode, you'll see that we're looking at the categories field section of the Show Categories table page, and at the moment we're looking at the column headings and the detail row for the columns which have been selected from the categories table and are being displayed. At the bottom of the page you'll see that we have a code tab. We've got 4 tabs there, the formulas, cell editor, data sources and code tab, the code tab being the one furthest on the right. And at the moment there is text displayed within the code tab indicating that we haven't selected a control above within the quick layout editor which has code methods associated with it. So let's click on one of the fields and you'll now see the code tab comes to life, as it were, is now populated. On the left hand side you'll see that the word set with 2 brackets is highlighted, and on the right hand side within the window to the right you'll see that we've got the code associated with that method. Now something that's very worthwhile in pointing out at this stage is that these may not necessarily be all of the methods which are associated with the control you've selected at the top, but they are certainly the most commonly overridden ones. So in this case, if I just drag this up so that we can have a look, you'll see now that I've got all of the code which pulls data from the data source associated with this table and binds it to the literal or the field value that's being displayed on the screen. I'll just scroll down there so you can see all of the code that's highlighted. And one of the things that Designer is extremely useful if you're new to coding or just venturing into the world of coding in your applications, something that Designer does to help you along the way is to put meaningful comments in all of this generated code such that you can understand the nature of the method that you're looking at and get a decent feel for exactly what it's hoping to achieve. In this case, as I said, all we're really doing is binding data from the data source with the literal or the label that's then going to be displayed on the page. Let's now go using our drop down at the top here. We navigate right to the top of the page up to here, the ASPX level of the page. At this point you'll see that we now in cell A1 have the categories table control selected, and now within our code tab you'll see that we have a number of different methods displayed to us. Init load, load data, create where clause, create order by, data bind, save data and pre-render. Something that's again extremely helpful, the way that Designer populates this code tab for you, is that Designer attempts wherever possible to put those methods in the chronological order in which they're executed within the page lifecycle. So the categories table control has an init method, init for initialization, and that an init method runs before the respective load method, before the load data. Load data calls the create where clause to determine what criteria which to pull data from the data source or the database. We may well be invoking some kind of order by within our SQL statement, and then we run the data bind to bind the various components within the table to their literals, one of which is the set method that we just looked at for the category name, which is here. So Designer is trying to be as helpful as possible, not just to give you access to the code, but to give you a reasonable idea of how that code fits together, and whenever you're selecting a control or controls in the top, to give you that indication of life cycle, so that when you come to override your code, you've got a much better chance of understanding where within the life cycle of that control or page is the best place to override it. The one other extremely clever thing about the Code tab is that the Code tab or Code tabs enable you to override code in such a way that your overrides will never be overwritten by Designer when you regenerate your application, and it does so by moving code from section 2 within the code behind or the controls code file up into section 1. Now traditionally, if you wanted to perform such an override, you can do that by accessing the code methods or code files rather under here, and you'll see when this pops up you've got two different code sections. Section 2 at the bottom, denoted by this region statement, is indicating to you that you shouldn't modify code there because everything within section 2 may well be regenerated by Designer as you work with the page. By contrast, within section 1 any code that you place in there will never be overwritten. And if we pop section 1 open, you'll see that we've got two different classes within section 1. In this case we've got the categories table control class, and then within the categories table control class we have the table control row class. Both of these, as you can see, are entirely empty classes. They are not currently overridden. So if we wanted to override the data bind for the table control, for example, we could do so by going down into section 2 and finding that code within the base categories table control class, copying it up into this section 1 code, and then placing our override in it. The fantastic thing about the code tabs is that the code tabs do all that work for us. So let's just pop these windows out of the way, and as I go into my code I'm simply going to add a single comment of acid yellow. On the left hand side you'll now see that the text of the data bind is shown in bold. That indicates to us that that code has been customized. So when I select other items, you'll see it's telling me that there has been no customization if I'm to hover on them. And you'll see when I hover over data bind, now that it's shown in bold, that now shows me that this code has been customized. And if I look in here, of course, all we've actually done is added in a very simple comment at the top. So I'm just going to build my application quickly. And while that is building, Designer will automatically copy that code, that method, the data bind, from section 2 and place it up into section 1 for us. So let's go to the controls code. Here we are once again then in section 1. And if I scroll down here, you'll now see the existence or appearance of the data bind method with my comment in. So the code tab makes it much easier for you to work in such a way by simply removing any knowledge or requirement on your part to copy code from section 2 up into section 1. We simply edit the code within the tab and allow Designer to manage moving that code around for you such that it doesn't get overwritten. The only other thing to really show you about the code tab of critical importance is this button, this restore button at the top here. At any point, if you're playing with code, taking code either from section 2 to 1 manually or using the code tabs to work with them, if the code method has been overwritten, this button will be ungrayed and enable you to restore that code to its original version. So you don't need to worry at any point if you do make an override through the code tab and you subsequently decide or find that you've made a mistake. Simply clicking the restore method will prompt you to restore it back to its original generated and uncustomized version. We click OK. Our comment's gone and the bolding within data bind has gone to indicate to us once again that it's not been overridden. So those are the code tabs. Extremely useful way to navigate your way through the code model underneath an IronSpeed Designer application. Thanks for watching.